I'm Francesca Maxime.
And I'm Matt McClure, and this is Currents. A Brooklyn church remembers the victims of AIDS.
It's important to let them know that we do remember them and that their lives were very meaningful to all of us who knew them.
Plus, what else did the Pope talk about in a brand new book? We'll find out. And 30 years later, a tribute to 4 church women who many consider modern martyrs.
They wanted to empower and help the impoverished of El Salvador.
Well, good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. Each year, close to 4,000 new cases of HIV are diagnosed in New York City. Yesterday on World AIDS Day, Mayor Bloomberg announced a new initiative to help people here in Brooklyn get tested for the disease. It's called Brooklyn Knows, and it brings together hospitals, health centers, and other organizations to promote voluntary testing.
But World AIDS Day is not only a time to raise awareness, it is also a time for reflection and for remembrance. Last night in Park Slope, the community came together at St. Augustine Church to honor friends and loved ones they have lost to AIDS.
This is a chance really to spend one day in prayer together, remembering those who have died, but also those who are living with HIV or AIDS.
It's a celebration. It's a Thanksgiving. All these wonderful people have gone before us, and many of them gone in the prime of their lives.
You know, I'm here with my children. It's really important that we're all here together as part of this community and to show support.
This is our 4th annual memorial service, candlelight for people who have died of AIDS.
And it's an interfaith prayer service.
The ministry that exists here at St. Augustine, the way people have come together, this evening and are calling attention and organizing, I think this is wonderful and very important.
For weeks leading up to this, we have the Ribbon Project, and the Ribbon Project is names affixed to the front of the church of people that have died of AIDS.
In the area of Park Slope, there are many people who have been affected by HIV or AIDS, either directly themselves or family or friends.
We really just came up with the idea of memorializing people that had died of AIDS in the neighborhood from the parish. And when people walk by the fence, they see the names, and there's a sign there if they would like to add a name. They put it in the rectory, and we add it to the church fence, and then these names will be read tonight.
Paul Corrigan, Ann Craig, Tom Dara.
Leonard Davis, Samson Duggins, Tony Ellis.
When people walk by the ribbons, they're very moved. Each year, more and more people come to know what the ribbons represent.
Several of my friends were honored here. They were all very dynamic young men who left us far earlier than they should have.
It's important to let them know that we do remember them and that their lives were very meaningful to all of us who knew them.
We've had these ribbons up around the church for a couple of weeks now, and not one of them has been touched.
Because of the progress of medicine, people are living longer. But people are also forgetting about the importance of finding a cure.
If you expand out and understand the community, not just to be Park Slope, not just to be New York City, but to really be, all God's creatures on the planet, then there are places throughout the developing world where AIDS is increasing and growing at rapid rates.
The Lord sees suffering, He reaches out and brings healing. This is a God who continually throughout the Gospels reaches out to heal the sick. He doesn't ask them how they got sick.
Here on earth, God's work must truly be our own, so we really need to become part of creation in a sense. It's our responsibility to make the world better.
And try and put a stop to it so that we don't have to do this anymore. No new names have to be added.
Well, we'll have more on efforts to fight AIDS just ahead. The bishops of Kenya speak out about the Pope's statements on condoms.
We'll also have more on the effort to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Those stories and the rest of the day's headlines when we come back.
Welcome back to Currents. I'm Francesca Maxime.
And I'm Matt McClure. Coming up in a bit, remembering 4 modern-day martyrs.
But first, let's have a look at the day's headlines. More news from the Pentagon's report on Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Just 3 out of the 145 chaplains who participated in focus groups said they would seek to quit or retire if the military reversed its policy of banning openly homosexual service members. The report says many chaplains were still opposed to repealing the policy. Some said they would refuse to assist anyone they knew to be homosexual, while others who believe homosexuality is a sin also believe it's a chaplain's duty to care for all service members. From Delaware, a jury has awarded $30 million to a man who says a priest sexually abused him more than 100 times. It's believed to be the largest reward given to a single person in a clergy abuse case. The priest had admitted to abusing the victim in sworn testimony. Although the abuse occurred more than 40 years ago, Delaware is one of 2 states to temporarily lift the statute of limitations on civil suits involving abuse of children. Meanwhile, a newly published letter shows that before he became Pope, Benedict wanted a faster process to punish abusive priests. In a letter from February of 1988, the man who was then known as Cardinal Ratzinger complained that the process to punish priests was complex, and as a result, bishops were seeking lighter penalties for abusers. Bishops in Kenya, meanwhile, are weighing in on the Pope's controversial remarks on condom use. In a statement, the bishops say the media took the comments out of context. Kenya's bishops also reaffirmed the Catholic Church's position on condom use as always unacceptable. Nearly 1.5 million Kenyans are living with HIV and AIDS. And in Illinois, the Bishop of Springfield is criticizing the state's Catholic governor for saying his faith is prompting him to support a bill legalizing same-sex unions. Bishop Thomas Pabronki says if Governor Pat Quinn wants to, quote, speak as a Catholic, then he is accountable to Catholic authority. The Illinois state legislature yesterday passed the bill, which Quinn has promised to sign into law.
Well, the Vatican's top diplomat says Christians are the most persecuted religious group in the world. At an international summit in Kazakhstan, Cardinal Tarcisio Bertone urged nations to fight anti-Christian discrimination in the same way they fight other religious discrimination. The summit is a 2-day meeting of the Organization for Security and Cooperation. It was scheduled to conclude today. Well, meanwhile, the head of the Vatican city-state says the Pope would prefer a solar-powered electric Pope-mobile to a gas guzzler. The comments came during a presentation of a book about solar power currently being used at the Vatican. And finally, some Good Samaritans in Indiana are being praised after finding an envelope stuffed with $100 bills and helping return it to its rightful owner. We get details now from Heather McWilliams.
Just had finished hanging that light over there, and Chris was looking on the ground. He walked over and picked up this envelope about right here.
The grungy envelope was sitting smack dab in the middle of a busy street.
It looked like it'd been in the street for a little while. He'd been ran over by a car.
But when the men opened it up, they could hardly believe their eyes.
Wow, there's a lot of money in here.
A stack of $100 bills and even more checks.
It's a rarity that you find any money on the street.
And even rarer that someone would try and find its rightful owner, which is exactly what the men did.
You're the guys I need to thank. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. I'm so
glad.
glad. After I found out where it goes to, I'm even more happy about that.
Carolyn Truax's name was one of several scribbled on the envelope.
And we did not even know the money was missing.
And until now, she didn't know who had turned it over to police.
We were just incredibly thankful.
Chris, Troy, and Doug knew the money was probably well needed, but they had no idea to what extent.
It goes to Yada Ministries.
The money had been raised for the ministry's mission work, helping those less fortunate and promoting the Word of God.
Do you believe this is God's work?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, because I mean, to have the right people come along and find the money so shortly after it was missing is just it's the Lord's money and he takes care of it.
And these Good Samaritans are just happy to have had a hand in it.
After hearing where it goes, karma's already showed up.
Thank you.
That's awesome. I mean, that's a full circle right there.
Nice to see people doing the right thing.
I would say.
Stay tuned. There's much more Currents coming up. Just ahead, his controversial condom remarks got all the attention, but we'll look at what else the Pope talked about in a new book.
Welcome back. Well, it's made headlines and sparked debate, but the new book of interviews with Pope Benedict, Light of the World, is about much more than just the controversy about condom use.
That's right. Yesterday, Father Joseph Fessio helped clarify some of what Benedict had to say on that particular subject. And tonight, this former student of the Pope touches on some other important subjects that have not gotten as much attention. Well, Father Fessio, thank you so much for joining us once again here on Currents. We really appreciate your time today.
Sure, Matt.
Well, we're going to talk today, of course, about some other things in the book, Pope Benedict XVI, Light of the World, the Pope, the Church, and Signs of the Times, that were not really talked about as much in the media. Of course, all of the discussion really, or most of it, has been about the Pope's statement on condom use. But there was a lot more, including the church sex abuse scandal. What did the Pope have to say about that in the book?
Well, first of all, let me say, Matt, that this book is an opportunity to sit with the Pope in his living room and ask him questions. And this journalist, Peter Zabald, is an experienced journalist, asking the same kind of questions you would ask. But just imagine being there with the Pope in an informal setting and being able to get all your questions on the table there and have him answer them directly. And Zabald said the Pope didn't refuse to answer a single question.
Wow.
So that's the kind of book it is. Now, about the sex abuse scandal, it's very good. Here's something surprising. He actually expresses gratitude for the media that exposed it. He says a lot of times, of course, they were out to undermine the church and discredit the church, but if it weren't for the fact that these things existed, they couldn't expose it. And therefore, we're happy to see the truth made clear wherever it comes from. So it's kind of interesting that he both had a criticism of the desire on the part of some people in the media to, look for bad in the church, but at the same time, he said we should not be upset about this because it was true, and they exposed it. So that's an interesting thing. But he also has a whole section on what's the cause of the crisis, and he beautifully summarizes what most of us have thought for a long time, namely that there was a lack of the sense of good and evil in moral theology, and even taught in some of our seminaries. So there was a moral relativism invaded the seminaries. That was one thing. And then secondly, candidates were accepted who may have had certain aptitude for working with youth and everything else, but they weren't really qualified to be priests, especially in this issue of same-sex attraction. So there's where he puts the blame, teaching in the seminaries and the wrong candidates being accepted. But then he also talks about the cover-up, and he says that was wrong, to push people around from parish to parish. And he says something very interesting, though, quoting an Irish archbishop. He said that we've always had a penal law in the church, a law which has to do with punishing people. But in the 60s and 70s, there was this general attitude, well, punishing is not an act of love, and so we should avoid punishing people. So the Pope says we have to recall the fact that sometimes punishing can be and must be the act of love you have to do. So that was part of the reason he attributed, he gave to the fact that these priests were not punished when they should have been.
Well, another very interesting statement.
There's a lot in the book. I'm
sure.
trying to summarize as close
Absolutely.
as I can, but it's great.
The Reader's Digest version, I understand. Well, of course, another very interesting part of the book, in my view, was the fact that Benedict said, if he wasn't able to do the job, if he wasn't physically or mentally able to do the job, he would consider, resignation. Tell me a little about that. Put that into context for us.
Well, first, popes have resigned in the past, but it's about 600 years since the last one did it. But the interesting thing is, it was in the context of the sex abuse scandal that the Pope was asked in the book, well, have you considered resigning? And he says, no, not now. You don't resign when it's difficult and leave for someone else. You address the problem yourself. I thought it was a wonderful, simple, but also a courageous answer. But then he said, of course, if a Pope's physical or spiritual or intellectual capacities begin to diminish so they can't do his job, he should resign. He even said it might be an obligation to resign.
Yeah. What are some other highlights of the book here just before we wrap up? We're quickly running out of time, but a couple other highlights maybe that you wanted to mention.
I'll give you two highlights for me. One was when he was asked, well, Holy Father, don't you think that after John Paul II he was a pop star and everything, that kind of difficult to follow in his footsteps? It was a beautiful response saying, look, I am who I am. I don't try to be someone else. I do what I can, and it's the Cardinals' fault. They elected me, but I just do what I can. And then secondly, he's asked, well, how does Pope Benedict pray? And he gives this beautiful expression of prayer. I'm a beggar before God. Of course, I speak first to Jesus, with whom I have a long acquaintance, he says, and I speak with my friends, Augustine, Aquinas, Bonaventure, so he talks about the saints as friends. Then he says, I just come before God, I speak to Jesus, begging him, sometimes thanking him, but also just joyfully.
Sure.
Beautiful little paragraph on prayer.
All right. Well, very good. Well, thank you so much, Father Joseph Fessio, for joining us here once again on Currents. We really appreciate your time today, shedding some more light on some of the other things that were discussed in the book with Pope Benedict and the journalist Seawald as well. We really appreciate your time.
Sure. God bless you. Thank you.
Thanks.
Certainly a lot in the book.
Absolutely.
Well, stay with us. There's more Currents straight ahead.
When we return, a musical tribute to 4 church women killed in the line of duty.
I will walk with you, search with you, be with you.
Well, finally tonight, 30 years ago today, 3 nuns and a lay missionary were raped and killed in El Salvador. It was part of a brutal pattern of attacks by death squads and members of the Salvadoran armed forces. Well, the goal was to intimidate those who were trying to help war refugees and also help the poor. Well, 2 of the women killed were Mary Knoll sisters from Brooklyn, Sister Maura Clark and Sister Ida Ford.
Now, 17 years ago, a center named for them opened in Bushwick. And last night, a benefit concert was held at St. Francis College to remember these women, whom many consider to be modern-day martyrs.
Maura Clark, Ida Ford, Dorothy Kaislin, Jean Donovan were in El Salvador during the time of the Civil War. And there was a big fear about them being in the country. And what kept them there through letters that they've sent and things that they said is that they wanted to empower and help the impoverished of El Salvador.
When the 4 church women were murdered, I knew at that time that I had to write something about it, and I wrote an opera. I just wrote it because I felt it. This year they came to me and they said, this year we want to celebrate the anniversary in a different way. We want to see how the deaths, rather than the tragedy, how did it affect people? What did it do to the world?
Search with you, be with you. Am I willing to suffer with the people here? Can I say to my neighbors, I don't know the answers, but I will walk with you, search with you, be with you.
They died working with the poor and for the poor. And I think that was the most difficult part for us. It was a time where women religious were looking at being with the poor, and it just seemed like the ultimate tragedy that had happened. So it was always with me. Women religious in Brooklyn, in particular in Queens, have a great sense of the poor, and I said to myself, well, I'd like to start a center. So in 1993, I did. And I always thought it was important, too, to name something after Maura and Ida in the diocese in which they came from. And we landed in Bushwick because we got space there and there was a need, and then we started working with immigrant women.
And in our center, we wanted to continue the legacy that they left behind, which was empowering immigrants.
Primarily, it is Spanish-speaking women. Most of them have children. So a lot of their desire is to be able to help their children with their education.
It's good because I talk with my children in English, and I need to learn because my children are in school now, and I have to help them.
For the most part, they're all living at or below the poverty line. So I think that's another part of why they come here, is to become more educated so that they can get better jobs to provide for their family better.
You know, at a time when so many people are struggling financially, you know, it's really the women in the Bushwick community that we serve that struggle the most, you know, that can least afford to, you know, to fall on hard economic times. You know, and sometimes those English language skills make the difference, you know, between, you know, marginal employment and real employment that'll support their families.
Well, it's really empowering women. you know, which they were doing in El Salvador. I thought it would be important for the center and for all of us to do something special for the 30th anniversary. So we went to visit Liz, and she said, I'd like to do something more hopeful.
And it changed me because I believe in them. And I believe, of course, I always have believed in giving yourself to the poor.
In an event like this that recognizes the women on, you know, on whose behalf the center was founded is incredibly important, because it really does give back to the work that they were originally doing in El Salvador.
Some beautiful music there, and just kind of an interesting bit of information about Ida Ford, who was one of the women, one of the nuns who was killed, was that she was the cousin of Bishop Ford, who the high school here near our studios is named for, and Bishop Ford was also a Mary Knoll missionary as well, so a very interesting connection there.
I would say, and what I like the most about this is it's not only a beautiful tribute musically, obviously the voices are amazing, and you know, always lovely to hear that, but really that they're reaching out here to the immigrant population. They're carrying on the mission. Obviously, those that were slain were in the line of duty. They were in service. They were with the poor and among the poor, and their legacy is alive and well right here.
Right. It lives on right there in Bushwick, and there's definitely, like as they said, there was the need, they had the space to do it, and they really wanted to continue that legacy. So some great work happening,
I would say.
All right. Well, we have more information about other performances of the oratorio over on our website. Just head to currentsny.net.
Well, that is it for our show for tonight. Coming up tomorrow, once again, we head into the deep with Bishop DiMarzio to talk about one of the most misunderstood feasts in the Catholic Church. We have that and much more tomorrow.
Meantime, remember you can always catch us online. We're over at currentsny.net. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter, too. Until next time, I'm Matt McClure.
And I'm Francesca Maxime. Thanks for joining us, and enjoy your evening.